Greetings, YouTube. Today I'm going to talk about eccentrics, which I'm sure will be much less controversial than some of the other videos I've done recently. The full title is Eccentrics, A Study of Sanity and Strangeness by Dr. David Weeks and Jamie James. Now, if Jamie James is his actual name, he should sue his parents, because that right there is just cruel. Now, this book deals with eccentrics, people who are a bubble off plumb, but not insane. Now, interestingly, Dr. Weeks discovered that no one had really done a full study on eccentrics. People had done lots of studies on volunteers, mostly college students during their college years, to study psychological behaviors and things. And of course, lots of people had studied the irrational, the mentally ill. But no one had ever gotten around to doing a full-blown scientific study on people that are eccentric. They're definitely outliers, from the average, but they don't have any more or less mental illness problems than the rest of the population. So they put a bunch of questionnaires out there and said, okay, everyone, we're looking for eccentrics. Do you think you're an eccentric, or do you think you have a family member that's an eccentric? They filled out questionnaires. Questionnaires came flooding in. They weeded through the questionnaires, and they came up with a bunch of people to do their study on. I think they had around 1,000 people, and it was slightly more females than males. And they came up with some general guidelines at the beginning of the study. And these are in descending order of frequency. Non-conforming, no real surprise there. Creative, strongly motivated by curiosity. Idealistic, he wants to make the world a better place and the people in it happier. Happily obsessed with one or more hobby horses, usually 5 or 6. Aware from early childhood that he was different. Intelligent. Opinionated and outspoken, convinced that he is right and the rest of the world is out of step. Non-competitive. No, not in need of reassurance or reinforcement from society. Unusual in his eating habits and living arrangements. Not particularly interested in the opinions or company of other people, except in order to persuade them to the correct point of view. Possessed of a mischievous sense of humor. Single. Usually the eldest or only child, and a bad speller. Now, there would have been a time in the past where I would have said that I was an eccentric. I'm an outlier from the social norms, but after having read this book, I'm not an eccentric. I'm just odd. I don't go quite far enough out on that fringe to be really an eccentric, nor do I have enough of the positive traits, and the fact that I suffer from depression probably rules me out right off the bat. From what I can see and hear, the genetic predisposition to depression is not something that is present among eccentrics. This was a fascinating book. It really got into the depth of what it is to be an eccentric, starting off with one of America's most famous eccentrics, Emperor Norton I, the self-proclaimed emperor of the United States of America that lived in San Francisco in the 19th century. In fact, there was a little covey of eccentrics at that time, all of whom lived in the San Francisco area. San Francisco has long had a tradition of being a place where the unusual come to congregate. And he just declared himself emperor. He issued currency, and it was accepted by the community at large. They loved the man. And he used to wear a uniform, and when the uniform got shabby, he petitioned the United States government to provide him with a new one because, well, as their emperor, they should do this. And the community got together, pitched in, and got him a new uniform. And when he died, thousands of people showed up for his funeral. He was beloved. Now, I think in today's world, so long as a person is self-sufficient, we are less inclined to really think of people as standouts from the crowd, unless they really make themselves obvious. Because a lot of eccentrics can quite frankly blend into the larger cities because how well do we know our neighbors anymore? I live in a building with 4 apartments. 3 of them are filled at the moment. I only know their names of the other 2 tenants because they're on the mailbox. I don't think I've ever spoken to any of them. We just lead different lives. Not to mention the fact that I work nights and sleep in the daytime. But I don't know any of my neighbors around me. This is just where I live. The community I'm connected with is right here. Out there on the intertubes. So it's not as difficult today to mask yourself among the masses if you're an eccentric, if you want to do that. And we have a few people in the city of Manchester where I live that may or may not fall into the category of eccentric, or they just could be on the edge of mental illness. I'm not really sure. I've met a few in my life. They're quite interesting, and it was a treasure in some ways, that the memories I have of them. One is still with us. The other, unfortunately, succumbed to leukemia. But he was a wonderful man, and he had a way of looking at the world that was very refreshing. So I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I recommend it to anyone who enjoys understanding people better and understanding what makes them different. Now, I'm never going to read this book again. Well, interesting. It's never going to pull me back in. I have too many books I have to read already. So, anyone who wants the copy of this book, right here, you send me a message. First come, first serve, and I will send it to you. If you're not the one to get it, but you're still interested, go hunt a copy down, because it's worth your time.